From your world news headquarters on the World Wide Web, it's time for your daily dose of sanity. This is the Meria Heller Show. Meria Heller is a published author, founder of the Universal Wheel, a lifestyle and philosophy based on our interconnectedness to all living things, a Reiki master, and delivers the news with spiritual views. How many intuitive news decoders, animal rights activists, and vegetarian broadcasters are there? Just one, Meria. Meria has provided independent news for a smart audience for over 13 years now on the Meria Heller Show, available at Meria.net. MERIA.net. And now, here is your host, the mouth that roars, Meria Heller.
Good morning, world. Meria here, alive and kicking. How's everybody doing out there? Today we're going to take a different kind of tact on the show, and yet another thing none of us ever think about. And then when you do think about it, it's like, wow, what a mind blower. Never thought of that before. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Her name is Jan Lisa Huttner. She is a Chicago film critic. She's a film critic for women arts. She's also an award-winning author and feminist activist. She's the founder of Women in the Audience Supporting Women Artists Now, which is a grassroots initiative to mobilize audience support for creative women in the media. And we're going to be talking about her latest book, Penny's Picks, 50 Movies by Women Filmmakers from the years 2002 to 2011. So I'm very pleased to have Jan with me. Good morning, Jan.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm very good.
You know, one thing I have to tell you, as long as I live and learn, I'm like, wow, there's always more to know. I never gave it a second thought when I'm enjoying a movie. Is the movie written or produced or directed by a woman? And looking at the Oscars, it used to be a time where I was all excited to watch the Oscars every year with my friends. We'd have like Oscar parties. Always sitting back and never thinking, how few women are actually getting up there aside from, best actress, best supporting actress roles.
That's
for
right.
Being behind the scenes. So what possessed you to look at this and work with this?
Well, it's been an evolutionary process. I grew up in New Jersey, so we were probably, passing each other on the street, sometimes in Manhattan, going to the same movies and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I've always been a movie fan, and I've actually been watching the Oscars from the womb. My mother also every year. So I was probably, watching Oscar in utero and watching Oscar from my first birthday on. And as you say, it was always fun, and it was always glamorous, and it was always exciting. And I also never gave it another thought. The critical moment for me was actually June 2nd. Hello, cat. My cat wants to converse with us. June 2nd.
Is your cat a critic?
2001 had an experience that was a really amazing experience. I'm sorry, 2002. Cat, go away. Sorry. It was the Sunday before Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood was released into theaters. Mm. And I opened up my Sunday New York Times and I read an article by a woman named Dana Kennedy, and that was the first time I ever heard the word celluloid ceiling. And I heard those words and a description of Professor Martha Lausen's research on women filmmakers, and it was just one of those crystallizing moments, and suddenly I started to see things in a whole new way, and the more I looked, the more I found.
Mm-hmm. Well, celluloid ceiling was a whole new term to me when I started reading your book. I've covered so many other things about Hollywood, but certainly never from this end.
Well, glass ceilings in the business world, marble ceilings in government, so this idea that there are ceilings and you can look through them, but you can't quite get there. And it turns out that in film in general and Hollywood in particular, other countries where the film making process is supported, in part by the government and is not strictly commercial. They actually have a much better track record. France, England, Israel, Germany, the Scandinavian countries, all of these countries have more and more successful women filmmakers than we do. So it's a combination of the pressure of commercial pressure that's keeping women down, and that's why it's so important that women in the audience think about this and, as I say, become smart movie consumers.
Right. So it doesn't matter if a woman writes and produces the movie if women don't go and support it.
Exactly, and there are a lot of reasons. You know, I try not to be a conspiracy theorist. I try to look at the multiple pressures that are combining. I'm a very process-oriented person, so you know when I write about this, I get a lot thrown back at me in various things that I've written on my blog and in columns on Huffington Post and that kind of thing. You know, and so I say, you know, what's going on here, and people think I'm, you know, pointing to some conspiratorial, well, you know, men are holding women down or something like that. It's not that simple. It's complicated, and what I don't like about that is that it lets people off the hook. You know, what I'm trying to tell people is that you're in effect voting with your dollars for movie ticket purchases. Mm-hmm. So think about that. Think about, you know, it's sort of like you are what you eat, well, you are what you see, you know?
Right, absolutely. Well, you know, another thing I hadn't thought about, which of course was like slammed across my face reading your book, is most movie critics that I can recall are men. So we're also getting a man's point of view on the movie. I mean, you mentioned, you know, Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood, which I thought was fabulous.
Right.
But it also got pretty lousy reviews. I don't even know how many people saw the movie. I bought the movie.
Yeah, and I did not include what I wrote about Yaya's in my book because technically it's not a review, you know, so if you look on my website and in various things that I've written, you know, I kind of try to differentiate between a review that at least has the objective of being objective and being fair and being balanced and that kind of thing, but sometimes I can't be, and that's when I rant, and I call something a rant as opposed to a review, and there have been a few times that I have ranted, and one of the things that I ranted about was what happened to Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. So, as I mentioned to you, I've recently relocated to Brooklyn. So after 35 years in Chicago, I'm now actually you're talking to me. I'm sitting in the middle of Brooklyn, New York. But
good for you. I was born there
in Chicago. And as many people know, Chicago is dominated by the figure of Roger Ebert.
Right.
And you know, bless his heart, he's still going strong. You know, a couple months ago, when I was still a regular at the Chicago screening room, so was he, and I saw him all the time. And he's a smart and wonderful guy, but he has blinders, as a lot of male critics do, and they're not aware of them. So that same weekend, Divine Sisters of the Yaya Sisterhood opened, and also the Born Identity opened. Mm-hmm. And so Roger Ebert had 2 reviews that weekend in the Chicago Sun-Times, very influential. He gave Born Identity a 3 and Yaya's a 1.5. And what frustrated me about the review that he wrote of Yaya Sisterhood is that he didn't even seem to know who the main character was. So he wrote this review absolutely trashing the movie and didn't seem to realize that the character played by Ashley Judd was really the main character, and the other characters were a way of getting you into the story of this person played by Ashley Judd, but he didn't seem to get any of that, nor did he seem to care. So that was a real wake-up call to me, and the result was that you could not see Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. It was playing in one theater in all of metropolitan Chicago. It was playing in one theater after the first week, and it was only playing 2 shows. So there was one movie theater, a multiplex in Chicago, that had 9 screens inside the multiplex. One of them was playing the Powerpuff Girls in the daytime and Yayas at night for the 7 o'clock show and the 9:30 show.
Right.
So that was it.
Right. Like throwing a couple of crumbs to the women in the audience.
Right, exactly. And I sort of tracked it, and saw what was happening in other cities, but since I was in Chicago, that was very present to me. And then when it came out on DVD, at that time we were still going to Blockbusters, 10 years ago, they couldn't keep enough copies on the shelf.
Right.
As soon as women had the opportunity to see it without having to go through that male barrier, they couldn't keep it on the shelves.
Absolutely. I mean, when I saw it, listen, I have friends like that. So when I saw it, I thought it was great. So, when I see a movie that I really love, I buy it. And I add it to my private collection for when I'm in the mood for, that kind of craziness or fun or whatever happens to be in the movie. But obviously, film critics make or break a movie.
Well, yes, in combination with popular pressure. So if you have somebody, if you, and I want to be empathic, I'm a married woman. A lot of the women I know are married. I want to be empathic toward how this happens. But, if you're looking to go to the movies that weekend and you see Roger Ebert gave The Bourne Identity 3 stars and he gave Yaya's 1.5 stars, then it takes a lot of, as we would say in Yiddish, chutzpah, to say to your husband, well, I want to see the Yayas. Usually it's just easier to say, yeah, sure, we'll go to see The Bourne Identity. So it sort of feeds into this vicious circle where women are giving up. It's very interesting to me that we fight for everything in every other domain, but when it comes to popular culture, it's like we're worn out, and we just say, yeah, whatever you want to see. And so, dollars flow to Bourne Identity, Bourne Supremacy, Bourne this, Bourne that, to this whole series of what my husband calls macho treats, what Gloria Steinem calls prick flicks. I like her term better. Have you ever heard that before?
No.
Prick flicks?
No.
Okay, well, it fits. If there are chick flicks and there are prick flicks, this whole flow of money goes to bigger and bigger prick flicks with more and more explosions, more and more knife fights, fist fights, gun fights, dog fights, and then we find ourselves 10 years later in a culture obsessed with guns. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so.
Right. I'm trying to think. You remember a couple of years back when that movie, The Notebook, came out.
Right.
And, smart men took their dates to see that movie. Okay. When a guy wants to score with his date, there are certain movies they need to take them through, whether the man's suffering or not. But, everybody loved that movie.
But people have actually told me that, which is funny. When I was just starting out, guys would come up to me and tell me that because it was their anniversary or because it was their wife's birthday, they had looked for something on my website to take her to. So it's like a big concession if a guy will open himself to the possibility of seeing a human movie.
Right.
Well, we went to see a chick flick, but it was our anniversary.
Right. Well, what's interesting? Right around New Year's, one of my good friends who happens to be a man, and one of my other good friends who's married, so it's 2 men, 2 women. We wanted to go to the movies before we went to dinner. And we went to see, we all settled on going to see Road Trip with Barbra Streisand. And what amazed, Guilt Trip, I'm sorry. Right. What a great movie. Okay. But what amazed me was the married man laughed the loudest and the hardest and the most continuously. And I'm sure he normally would not have picked that movie.
Right. Right. And it was fun. It was just fun. And
Right.
she was wonderful, and Seth Rogen was wonderful. It's like, sometimes you can just go to enjoy something about people without having to apologize because there's no explosions in it,
Right.
I mean,
Well, in all fairness, Jan, my friend had asked me if he thought he pre-assumed that I would have no interest in seeing the movie Django. And I said to him, what, are you kidding me? Let's go see it.
Right.
And he was surprised that I enjoyed the movie so much. But I've always been a freak for Western movies and I forget the Trenton Tarantino's movies. Mm-hmm. And after we saw it, I was like, let's go see it again. So I think sometimes we both sexes tend to prejudge each other and, what we enjoy and what we don't enjoy.
And that's why I love, because I do this with my husband, our website is called Films for Two, the online guide for busy couples. And that just has the database, the short, we call them movie haikus. They're just 50 words each and a rating. And so each, week we go to the movies and we say, okay, here are the ones we agree about. Now, I always joke that it's one container of popcorn, 2 tickets, and 2 points of view. So we sit there in the movie, we're sharing the one bucket of popcorn, we're sitting side by side, we're holding hands, we've been married a long time. We come out of the movie, and sometimes even when we agree, we've still seen 2 completely different movies.
Well, yeah, it's like Field of Dreams. Some people saw it as a metaphysical movie, some people saw it as a baseball movie. So it's kind of interesting.
So even when we're agreeing or even when we're disagreeing, sometimes our reasons are completely different. But we're seeing it together, and the ones that we both agree on are the ones that we think people can go to see together from multiple points of view.
Right.
And it's something that started out as a hobby and a joke and everything else and has evolved. Now, the rule that we have now that I'm a critic and I go to a lot of advanced screenings and I have different editors that I write for, I often see things before he does. So, say with respect to the Guilt Trip, we have a rule that I have to want to see something twice before I make him go the first time.
Oh, okay. Then, I can understand that. Let me ask you this, though, Jan. Why aren't there more women film critics? And I don't recall seeing any people of color as film critics either.
It's very difficult, and the reasons are very similar because print is declining. The number of film critics in the world is declining. The spots are locked up, and I can't give you the names, but there was a case in Chicago that I knew about where supposedly a position had opened up at one of the major papers in Chicago, and supposedly they were going to look for a woman, but then they ended up hiring another guy. And what I heard through the grapevine, I can't verify this, but it sounds right to me, the dollars at that time, the film critics were paid much higher than the theater critics and the music critics, and because there was a lot more advertising and revenue coming in from film. Now, this isn't quite the case anymore, but there was a lock. I mean, Roger Ebert has a lock on his position. Other people, the 2 critics at the New Yorker, David Denby and Anthony Lane, they pretty much have a lock on these positions. Now, one of the things I'm really proud of, at the time that so let's backtrack to 2002. When I read that article in the New York Times, the one that came out the weekend before Yaya's, I was really angry, and so I wrote a letter to the New York Times, and as you see in my book, they published it, which is amazing. It still amazes me. I mean, the odds of ever getting anything in the New York Times, the odds against that is huge. So to have the very first letter you ever wrote to the New York Times get published by the New York Times is, probably statistically more difficult than being hit by a lightning bolt. Mm. And yet it happened. And at the time, one of the things that I pointed out in my letter, is, again, published verbatim in my book, that they should look closer to home before blaming the victim of all the reasons why women don't want to make movies, which is what the article said. Well, they don't want to make the commitment and this and this. And I said, try looking closer to home. Who reviews films for you at the New York Times? And it was 3 men at that time: Elvis Mitchell, Tony Scott, and oh God, I'm missing the third person. But anyway, then soon after that, for various unrelated reasons, Elvis Mitchell left, and they did hire a woman film critic, and she's still there today. So, I felt very good about that. I joke with people in my lectures. I've never gotten a thank you message from her, but that's okay. I pointed it out to them, they posted the letter, and then the next thing you knew, they added a woman film critic to their roster, Manola Dargis.
Well, good. Well, there's the power of the pen, for sure.
Right, but she's still one of the very few.
Well, I'm trying to think of that slick, black-haired, slick guy years ago. He was always at the Oscars. He was the film critic. And I can't remember his name, but one thing I do remember, when I was living in New York, whatever he said about a movie, if he gave it a bad review, I knew it was a good movie. And if he gave it a good review, I knew it would suck. So that's how I used to go by it, because if you are going to follow a movie critic, you have to be in alignment with the way they see movies in order to give a crap about what they say about the movie. But I used to say, oh, he said it was crap, so it's probably good. And I would go in the opposite direction. One of the things I want to tell you that I didn't expect to do with your book, and I want to explain it to my listeners. Jan's got 50 movies listed in here, and she puts in her own 2 cents about it and critiques them and whatnot. And sometimes she'll tell you, don't read this part if you haven't seen the movie yet. and you also give out how many stars you give the movie. Okay. Right. So there's a lot of movies in there, of course, I had seen, but there were a lot that I hadn't seen. So I immediately went over to Netflix. And I don't know how many people would do this, okay? So I hope you don't think I'm really crazy, Jan. I went over to Netflix, and of course I put some of the movies on my list that I hadn't seen. Some of them, the topic just didn't interest me. But then I decided, and here we go, I get the crazy award of the month probably. I decided to look up every one of these 50 movies on Netflix to see what Netflix's rating was.
I love you.
Okay, and I wrote their rating next to your rating in every single one. Okay, I don't know how many hours it took me, but I guess I'm ADHD somehow, or a savant.
No, you're my kind of woman.
Or
a savant. Exactly what I would do.
And I went looking through it, and I have to tell you that the majority of the time, they rated it way lower than you did.
Yep.
Even movies that, I don't know if you have Netflix, but Netflix gives you the opportunity to go in and rate a movie after you see it. So they get an idea of what your taste is.
Right.
But I was kind of surprised, I was like, wow, look at this. She gives 2 Days in Paris, which I have on my list. Don't tell me about it. I haven't seen it yet. You gave it 4 stars. Netflix gave it 2. I mean, that's a big difference.
Yep.
So I'm thinking then to myself, how's this happening at Netflix? Do they have men working on reviewing their movies? Is it all done by computer? How does this happen? Because I went through the whole book doing that. Just to prove your point.
Let me answer that, because this is a really crucial thing and a source of unending frustration and, honestly, pain to me. So I give all these lectures, and I have women in the audience. Maybe it's a meeting of AAUW, American Association of University Women, which was the group that started all of this. I was a state board member when all this project with Witteswan started. So I go into do a lecture for a branch, and there's maybe 25 people in there, and somewhere in the course of the Q&A, I say, how many of you are on Netflix? And almost every hand in the room goes up. And I say, and how many of you go in and rate the movies after you've seen them? And there's maybe 1 or 2 hands.
Wow, that's ridiculous. I do it all the time. Maybe there's something wrong with me.
I say, please, please, not only for yourself and to express yourself, but that other women coming after you will know, and they go, oh, yeah, we will, but they don't.
Well, I mean, how lazy is that? It's just a click. It's just a click.
The same thing happens if you look. I'm on Internet Movie Database, which is my main resource, hours and hours. Probably I'm on Internet Movie Database a half hour every day at a minimum, depending on what I'm writing and what I'm working on. If you look at the user profiles of who's rating a movie, it's almost entirely men. The male vote exceeds the female vote by usually at least 2 to 1. Even on a chick flick, you'll find, because they have the statistical breakdown, men, women in various age groups, and you'll see that even on a chick flick, there are more men rating the film than there are women. Is that because more men have seen it? Likely no. Is that because more men have gone in and taken the step of rating it? Likely yes. Similarly, on Rotten Tomatoes, which is the great aggregator for critics, if you go down the list of reviews, you will see that at least 2/3 of the reviews for an average movie posted on Rotten Tomatoes are reviews by men. So when you're looking at the aggregation of what the quote-unquote critics think of a movie, you're getting an overwhelmingly male view.
Right. Well, I was reading in the book in your book, that said recent studies have shown that men write or direct approximately 90% of the major Hollywood films. So, even if we want to go to a movie that is written or directed by a woman, they're going to be few and far between. They're going to be
few and far between. And again, it's not a conspiracy so much as it's the reflection of all these forces. So what you are doing, namely taking these reviews and putting the titles in Netflix, this is exactly what I want people to do. And what I'm hoping is that you start to hear the names, you start to develop more confidence in your own judgments, regardless of what Rotten Tomatoes or Netflix says. You start to spread the word, and then the next time you hear that a movie is coming out by one of these directors that you liked the last time, you go again. So her name starts to mean something to you the same way now everyone knows who Spielberg is. Anne Fletcher, who directed The Guilt Trip, this is actually her 4th movie, and I've liked them all. So when I see the name Anne Fletcher, I get a pleasant resonance from that. I go, oh, a new Anne Fletcher movie. I like the last 3. I'll probably like this one too. And then you start to see that the way that I'm reviewing an Anne Fletcher movie and the way some of my male colleagues are reviewing an Anne Fletcher movie, it's almost like we've seen 2 entirely different movies.
Right. Well, I remember years ago, look, it just so happens I have 5 sisters. And we all grew up in Brooklyn too. And I remember we all got addicted to Lena Wertmüller's films. So anything she put out, which was so bizarre and European, you had to love her movies.
But she's the first woman, you probably know this, but Lena Wertmüller is the first woman who was ever nominated for a Best Director Oscar.
Yeah,
there have only been 4 in all of Oscar history. Lena Wertmüller's 7 Beauties was the first time.
And hilarious, too.
Yeah.
Right. But to know that there's only 4 Oscar-winning writers.
No, not winning, nominated.
Oh, not even one.
Nominated. in the whole history of the Oscars, which is now 82 years, there are only 4 women who have ever been nominated for Best Director. Lena Wertmuller was the first for Seven Beauties. Jane Campion was the second for The Piano. Sofia Coppola was the third for, brain dead moment, the Bill Murray movie, and then Catherine Bigelow for Hurt Locker, and she was the first and only winner.
Well, while I was reading through your book, I thought about the success of Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. Mm-hmm. So it seems to be changing somewhat on TV. I mean, let's face it, 30 Rock, outside of their last season, which I thought they should have quit before they even put this last season out, was fabulous.
And I think that that's partly the same issue as the DVDs. Women have a lot more control over their own television and don't have to ask permission or, convince a guy they can watch what they want to watch. And so there's a lot more programming and a lot stronger set of women characters on television than there is in the movies, because you just get what you want and you watch what you want when you want to watch it. You don't have to arrange for childcare, and you don't have to ask your significant other to go to a chick flick. You just watch what you want, right? So there's a reason why television is a more female-friendly terrain than the multiplex.
Right. Jen, we're going to take a short break. When we get back, I want to talk a little bit about why. What's the importance of women making movies. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Hi, it's Meria. I've got a question. How much more crap are we going to take? We're running out of time, folks, to wake up anyone with ears to hear. Government corruption, government lies, cover-ups, false flags, genetically modified organisms in our food, the HARP program, chemtrails over our heads, pharmaceuticals in our water, poisons in our food supply, corrupted elections, being ruled by the elite 1% of 1%. When will it end? It'll end when everyone learns the information that's here on site, in my archives, and the new shows that I tirelessly put out 4 days a week. Available for pennies a day. Get over to Meria.net, Meria.net. Pick a subscription of your choice. Get educated, and then share that education. I've always believed if everyone in this world knew the information that I present on this show, now since 2000, we would change this world on a dime. So ask yourself while you're sitting back there, if you've never supported my work, but still listen, how much more crap are you going to take? Get in there and get a subscription today. You'll be so happy you did, and you'll become one of the smartest people on the planet, able to decipher the fake news they give us every day in instants, just like my listeners always manage to do. So for now, let's get back to this show. Okay, welcome back. I'm speaking with Jan Lisa Huttner, Penny Spicks, 50 Movies by Women Filmmakers. And I hope you guys out there are enjoying this too. And like I said, hey, you got a good Western, I'm there. Those are always my favorites. So, hey, don't prejudge us, girls. But at the same time, why is it important that women write and produce films? And that's a question I wanted to ask you. I mean, I already know the answer, but I thought I would ask you because it seems that in most films, the stars or protagonists are always the males. There's very rarely a female that women can identify with. And why is that important? Well,
again, going back to Martha Lowson and her research, which is really what opened my eyes to all of this, she has demonstrated statistically that when you have women behind the scenes writing and or directing the film, you are likely to have more female characters in the film and more interesting female characters. So the idea of the protagonists and there being women who are in lead roles becomes more likely when you have a woman behind the scenes, either as the writer and or director of the movie. There's a very tight correlation. Mm-hmm. So the flip side is, if 86% of your films have no women screenwriters on the team, and 92% of your films are directed by men, so you have a multiplex world that's dominated by male characters with male concerns. That's fine. I love guys. I love my husband. I love my nephews and my friends. And as you do, I love cowboy movies, and I also love war movies. My dad, he was. You grew up in New York, so you probably know Picture for a Sunday Afternoon.
Oh yeah, $1 Million movie.
So, some of the dads were watching football, but my dad was watching Picture for a Sunday Afternoon, and so I got a lot of John Wayne. And my all-time favorite film is actually Lawrence of Arabia, which I saw with my dad when I was a little girl, and then many times since then. It's sort of the touchstone film of my life, where I measure who I am in my life by the various characters in Lawrence of Arabia. And you may know, your audience may not, but you may know there's not a single woman in Lawrence of Arabia, none. The movie is almost 4 hours long, and there are no female speaking parts, and that's okay, because there's a huge range of character types, and I'm of the opinion, if you're making a movie about the world of men, there shouldn't be. You shouldn't throw a woman in there just to have a woman in there. If you're in the submarine, or you're trekking with the camels across the desert, that's what you should do. But the flip side of that, we're half the world. Women are women hold up half the sky. This is a term that's frequent now since the Sherry Woodun Nicholas Kristof book. Everybody knows that phrase. Women hold up half the sky. So if we're only seeing movies from a male perspective, and we're only seeing women created by men, and we're never seeing women created by women, or men created by women, then we're only getting half the perspective. And of course, when you add in the issues of race and culture, in addition to the issue of gender, we're getting a very, very small slice of stories in the world. And in one of her statistics, when Martha Lausen was doing the content analysis, she statistically demonstrated that you had a greater chance of being on screen if you were an extraterrestrial than if you were an Asian woman. Now, how crazy is that?
Right.
There are
really,
billions and billions of Asian women in the world.
The only one I seem to recall offhand is Lucy Liu. Okay,
there you go.
That's about it, Lucy Liu, and I don't think she's all that. But there you have it. But to me, the other flip side of this is, not only are the women seeing life through a male perspective, so are the men. I'm trying to think of the name of that movie with that heavy-set black girl. It was the most Precious, the most upsetting movie I've ever seen. And I watched that movie with my son, who's 30 some odd years old. We watched it together. Neither one of us could sleep for 2 days after seeing that. And all we did was have conversation about what we had seen. So to me, that's important for men to understand a woman's life, a woman's view, as well as educating women as well.
Right.
And I think that's the part, after reading your book, because, I've thought about it, but not as sharply as I thought about it after I went through your book, that we all suffer. It's not just the women who can't get into Hollywood, who can't write a movie, can't get nominated. It's so many important gender feeling stories that would help men and women understand each other better.
and understand their world. You know, the thing that I love most about film, there's a very limited number of places that I can go in my life. There are most of the places in the world where I can never be. And by definition, I can't ever be in the past, and I can't ever be in the future. But when I'm in a movie theater, I can go anywhere. I can go, you know, back to the Romans. I can go, you know, up to 2001 to the moon or Jupiter and beyond. And I can go all around the world. In fact, just last night, my husband and I watched a movie called Valley of Saints, which is set in Kashmir. It's one of the best foreign language film candidates for this year's Independent Spirit Award, and Richard and I are Spirit Award voters. So last night, my husband and I were in Kashmir. And that's thrilling to me. It's thrilling to me that I can sit on my tuchus, you know, good Yiddish word. I can sit in my chair, but emotionally, I can go to all these different places, past, present, and future, all around the world. And for an hour and a half or 2 hours, I can walk in another pair of shoes. And I believed so sincerely that the world is bigger, that my world is bigger the next day. Today, I can tell you, last night I was in Kashmir, and, you know, I could see the difference between my life and the life of people in Kashmir, but I could also see what I have in common in my life and the life of the people in Kashmir. And so today, my world is a bigger place because it includes spending last night in Kashmir.
Right.
And I think we all need that now.
Absolutely. I mean, if we were to watch, you know, I love watching independent films. And, you know, and all right, I will admit, it may sound nerdish. I like watching documentaries, too. But when I was young, I never thought that would happen. But bingo, one day it happened. But for me, if people could read these first-person stories, you know, of what it's like, let's say, you know, growing up in Iran, or you know, the Palestinian kids, or you're looking at, you know, some of these other movies, you start to understand that basically, even My Big Fat Greek Wedding, okay, you start to understand that basically all humans are the same, okay? We all have the same human emotional issues. We all have the same desires for family and security and whatnot. I think it could also help all of us to look at the world as brothers and sisters instead of being okay with droning and bombing so many different countries, and we don't even know who those people are.
There you go. There you go. Now you've really put your thumb on the core of my concerns and the reason why I dedicate my life to this. Because sometimes people say, "Oh, it's just a movie." It's not just a movie. We're in this vicious cycle now where most of the things that are playing at the multiplex are revenge and destruction, and we're blowing things up. The thing that really makes me cry is that all these movies are set in locations and all they do is blow them up. There was this movie a couple of years ago where they actually had a big shootout at the Guggenheim Museum in Manhattan, and you know, here's this, you know, gorgeous architectural marvel with all this great art inside, and the only thing that this movie wanted to do was use this elegant spiral staircase because they could blow it up. I mean, they didn't really, but that was their set. You know, so all these different movies, starting with The Bourne Identity, which was really the first major money-making thing to start this trend that Roger Ebert gave 3 stars to. You know, these people run around the world, these macho guys with their big guns, they run around the world blowing it up. And here's where we are in consequence. 10 years of this steady diet of prick flicks. And where are we? We're blowing up the world. And for me, I would rather meet the people of the world, even if it's just 2 hours in Kashmir on a Monday night.
Exactly. Well, maybe you don't know because I don't know how much TV you get to watch or how much. I don't have TV. I either use Hulu Plus or I use Netflix. But Hulu had a new series. I guess they made it just for Hulu, and they call it The Little Mosque. And I started watching it, and it's about these Muslims. I forget which town, some small town, America, that open up a little mosque, and they're sharing a church with a very kind, I think, Protestant pastor. But what I like about it is they're showing the human side of these Muslims. Okay, even though there is a shock jock in the show who's always saying they're terrorists and, he's scared, if they get a leak in their roof, he thinks they're, blowing up the town. I think it's great because it's not demonizing all Muslims. Those kind of movies, those kind of really heartfelt, these are other human beings just like you, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, grandpas. Let's face it, today we have no anti-war movement. There is none. Okay, nobody seems to care. But what they have to get is those people are just like us. Regardless of the propaganda that we're told, they're just like us. So when you do have a movie that comes out, I don't remember the name of it, years ago, it was a big hit. It was a romantic comedy about an American boy marrying a girl in India, and it was all about the wedding. And to me, those kind of movies bridge cultures, and they can help get rid of the hate instead of constantly reinforcing the propaganda and the violence.
You mean Bride and Prejudice?
It might have
the
been
Indian
that.
movie, because it was a play on the Jane Austen classic Pride and Prejudice, but instead it was set in India.
Yeah, I think
made
so.
by
It was
woman
all I
named
remember
Meria
was
Chadha.
it was a lot of really good dancing and a lot of amazing costumes. Okay, I watched too many movies. It's like how many books I read. It's hard to remember titles. But those
I enjoyed it very much, and I enjoyed her spirit. I did a wonderful interview with her, with the director, Gurinder Chadha. She's the same person who did Bend It Like Beckham, set in England, and wonderful filmmaker. And her husband is actually Japanese. They met at the Toronto Film Festival. It's
right.
A wonderful story.
Well, you have some of the 50 movies that you have in your book. I just want to read a couple of the titles of my favorite ones. Okay, so men out there listening, you've already seen movies made or produced by women. Number one was King Kong in 2005, which I thought was a rare but excellent remake. Cadillac Records, everybody should see it. What a great movie. You want to dance through it. The Devil Wears Prada. Let me tell you something. I worked for Meryl Streep's character when I lived in New York. Okay.
Real?
Yeah. Well, her name wasn't Meryl Streep, but it might as well have been her. So for me, that was from when I was like 17 to 19, and I was working on 14th Street in the fashion industry. And that was my boss, okay? So needless to say, I probably enjoyed that movie 100 times more than most people. But Julie and Julia, which was fabulous, and who didn't like the producers? I was kind of surprised to see some of the movies in here, and everybody loved Sunshine Cleaning. That was hilarious. I didn't know that was, directed by a woman. And Frida, absolutely excellent.
So Frida's another case where Frida ended up getting 6 Oscar nominations, won 2, but did not get a nomination for Julie Taymor. And I actually, again, not to beat up on him, but Roger Ebert is so famous, so his opinions are so influential. When he was doing his Oscar previews for the year, he said, and this is pretty much a direct quote. I have the actual quote in my book, but he said, Selma Hayek has the role of a lifetime as Frida, but the movie itself got more respect than affection. And I'm like, who is he talking about? Every woman I know loved Frida, so whose opinion is that? And in my book, I actually have a quote from David Denby, who's the critic from The New Yorker who reviewed Frida. It's the most condescending, and so he says these people punching each other with chili peppers. I got tired of the Punch and Judy show. That's what David Denby at the New Yorker wrote about Frida.
Oh my God!
Exactly. So when you go back to how people pick movies, it's the review process, but it's also the blurb process. BLURB, the blurb process.
Right.
So pick up your Sunday paper and look at the movie reviews in your Sunday paper. You'll see that almost all the blurbs are by men, and certainly the blurbs of the serious films are almost all men. And then for the chick flicks, maybe they'll have one or two women, but the opinions on Rotten Tomatoes, the blurbs on the posters and in the trailers, we're getting a very male-dominated view of what we should see. So as a result, all these films that are made by women filmmakers never get the chance to find their audience.
Right. So I guess people should make up their own mind, talk about Frida, as an artist, first of all, it was the most beautiful visual movie I've seen in a long time. Mm-hmm. And truthfully, Al Molina did a great job in that movie too.
Yes, he did.
It's almost like you can't find a bad movie if he's in it. Okay. And sometimes, most of the time, I have to tell you, I go by this who's in it than, what's it about. Because I also know there's certain actors that they can't put out a bad movie. They won't even consider being in a bad movie. But, you look at this and then you say, well, how do we solve this? How do we get more women voices out there? How do we get more women to want to go into filmmaking? Are there more women going into filmmaking today?
That's not the problem. Really, it's not. There are a lot of women in filmmaking, not quite 50%, no, but there are a lot of women making films. The problem is that they don't get the chance to get their audience, so they make one, maybe two, but they don't have the opportunity, like a Steven Spielberg, to make a whole body of work.
Right.
So there are very, very few women filmmakers who develop the market credibility to be allowed to see their visions, to improve their craft, to get better, which is one of the really important things with Catherine Bigelow, how important it was that her film, The Hurt Locker, got recognized, and she became the first woman ever to get a Best Director Oscar. But look at what happened now. She made this, very important film that's, a strong performer in the marketplace and got a lot of buzz and this and that, and yet when the Oscar nominations came out, she was not on the list. And when I pointed that out in a piece on Huffington Post, you wouldn't believe the nasty, well, we already gave her token Oscar, so why should we nominate her again? I mean,
wow, token Oscar. They would never say that about Steven Spielberg, would they?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly. So it's like we gave a woman an Oscar already, so why are you women still complaining?
Right.
So four nominations in 82 years and one Oscar, but that should be enough for us. We have our token.
Right. Wow. Hey, this is the world we live in. Let me ask you this, Jan. I can tell you this, Valentine's Day is coming up, so men are going to be scrambling. They're going to be scrambling for a movie to take their girlfriends to. I have to tell you, every now and then I look in the paper, see if there's anything decent in the theaters, and sometimes there could be 6 different things, and not a one of them, it calls to me. Any movies, any love movies good for Valentine's Day this season?
You mean coming up in the theaters?
Right.
I haven't seen any yet. And really, this is the time of year that is so oriented toward Oscars between now and the end of February when we have the Oscars that Valentine's Day kind of gets crushed in that.
Right.
And the things that do get put out as Valentine's Day movies unfortunately tend to be the lowest common denominator kind of chick flick. You know, these compilation movies,
right?
Where
The
they
Jennifer Aniston movies,
12 different love stories, or something like that.
Right.
So I would recommend, movies on DVD, and there are, great, wonderful love stories out there. But I agree with you. It would be great to go to a movie theater and see that in February. I just don't. It just doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah.
But that is the anniversary of our website. We're date our when we switched over from being Films for Two as a hobby to Films for Two as our business and our lives. We unrolled our new website on Valentine's Day, so that's a big day for us.
Good for you. Good for you. And there's a live link here for that. You had a quote in your book by a Professor Martha Lausen.
Right.
She says, if you can change women's representation in the media, you will change women's place in the world.
Right.
I think it's that simple.
Right.
And I think that's a really deep sentence, and I have to agree with it.
Right. That's become the tagline on my book and in everything I say. If we change women's representation in the media, we change the world.
Absolutely.
And I believe that.
Absolutely. For me, and it's not because I'm older, but one thing that I always find offensive is when they just throw women into a movie because they need some tits and ass. Okay, I don't know how else to say it, and it's so inappropriate,
right.
And it's inappropriate. All of a sudden you've got some naked breast or somebody getting laid, and I'm like, what does this have to do with the movie? But I know they want to get their R rating or whatever. But I find it very offensive. I've always found it offensive. Back in the day, and I'm sure when you were watching $1 Million Movie, and the screen went to black when two people hooked up, you knew what was happening. You didn't need to see it. Okay.
Well, not in those days, and I was with my dad, but,
Oh, well, I kind of got the hint, I kind of got the hint, and the black screen was fine. Today it's like,
right.
Who needs to see this, And for me, it's a distraction from the movie. If you want to see that, then go for soft porn or porn or whatever. But, here you are in the middle of a fabulous movie, and all of a sudden one of your favorite actors or actresses is, bare ass naked, and it's like, what's this? But, hey, they say sex sells, and I think that's part of why we're in the situation we're in this country. But I have to tell you, Penny, I called you Penny because I know that's your little screen name.
Well, a pen is a female swan.
Okay.
So the project is called Widow Swan, Support Women Artists Now. And so Penny is a female swan, so she's become my feminist alter ego is Penny, the female swan, Support Women Artists Now.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It just slipped out of my mouth. I guess my higher self said call her Penny now. I have to tell you, this is totally enjoyable. It gave me a whole new tact. I told you during the break, I know I've always been a total movie freak. And when $1 Million Movie was on, I watched the same movie all week and all weekend. Okay.
I think that's how a lot of us learned.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, I watched
Do you remember
it
the
over.
one about the nurses in the Philippines? The one with Claudette Colbert?
Who remembers? That's a little before my time, but
No, but that was the one on $1 Million Movie that I remember watching 4 or 5 times that week. I was just riveted. So I learned a lot.
Well, some of my favorites, of course, was Yankee Doodle Dandy. So I kind of memorized the whole movie, memorized every song. Mighty Joe Young, absolutely my best. The remake totally sucked and ruined the movie for me. And let's see. Oh, Abbott and Costello's Hold That Ghost. I can watch those 3 movies. Even now I own them. I can watch them at least once every 6 months. It's like a refresher course, just in case I missed a word or two. So, I grew up with really good movies, with real movie stars. Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Cary Grant, real movie stars.
I'll bet you've seen it, and if you think about it, you'll remember it. It's called So Proudly We Hail, and it's with Claudette Colbert and Paulette Goddard and Veronica Lake. And what I remember is that was the movie. I watched it on $1 Million Movie, and I'm sure I watched it at least 4 or 5 times that week. And that was the movie that convinced me that I wanted to be where it was, that I didn't want to stay home.
Right.
I wanted to be in the world, and that was very inspiring to me. In a world where there were so few female heroes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, my mother used to force us to watch anything Bette Davis did, because I think she took some secret pride in watching us cry. And it still amazes me till today that no one's done a movie about her life. I mean, here she was, she was bigger than life and one of the best movie stars ever. Mm-hmm. I used to think, Susan Sarandon could play her really well because she's got the eyes,
That's true. That's a really great point.
I know. So maybe some woman filmmaker that'll listen to this interview will get the hint and do a movie about Bette Davis. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today, Jan. It really has been
a great pleasure. I've enjoyed it so much, and I thank you for all your work and all your interest.
Oh, you're very welcome. Take good care now.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, I hope you enjoyed today's show. It's a little different, but, if you think about Operation Hollywood and so many other things that I've covered on the show, this is yet one more tact and something to think about. Anyway, tomorrow, Joe Anthony returns, Stars Are Us. Let's see what's going on in February. And on Thursday, of course, I will be back with the news. So thanks for listening. See you guys tomorrow.
Thank you for listening and supporting The Meria Show. Tell others what you learned today. Knowledge becomes wisdom only when it's shared. Encourage others to subscribe today. www.meria.net. Often imitated, never duplicated. A world of information all in one place. www.meria.net. Always ahead of the curve. Always on your side. Get active or get radioactive. Subscribe today.